You put your RDS database and your Lambda functions within a private network, within your VPC and in a private subnet, exactly like the certification told you. But now you face your first real-world project and understand that you can actually not connect to it. Because you need to look at your data, you want to apply migrations or simply connect your favorite debug tool or whatever SQL tool you like to use to your database, and you see it is a bit harder than connecting to your local host Docker setup. In this video, I want to show you exactly how to do that. You can use a Jumphost, which is basically a small Linux machine running on EC2, which can connect via a very cool CLI edition from AWS via the Session Manager plugin, and through that you can connect to your database. And with that, you can actually simply look at your data, apply migrations, see the database, or whatever you want to do. You don't need any public IPs, you don't need any long-living SSH keys or even a NAT gateway. You simply need a Jumphost on a really small Linux machine, and that's it. By the end of the video, you will see how that works. I also brought CDK code, so you can go ahead and deploy it within your own AWS account, and I will also walk you through it. Let's get started. For those of you new here, I'm Sandro. I'm building full stack applications on AWS for the past 6 years, and I've built applications with millions of requests. And I started the same way as most people start within the AWS space. I did a certification, the solution architect associate and the developer associate. And after that, I thought I can actually do something on AWS. Turns out I couldn't. So I want to show you my lessons learned, how I learned it, and how to actually apply AWS for the real world without the need for certifications. So this is how our typical architecture looks like. We have an AWS account, we have a VPC, and in the VPC we have a private subnet. In the private subnet we have the RDS, so our database, and we have a Lambda function which can connect to the RDS. And we expose our data via an API, however that is secured, and the API has the integration to Lambda, and Lambda in the end can access the RDS data. And all of that is fine, right? But you will see that you need to access your database directly more often than you think. Typically you use some ORM, for example Drizzle, and you want to apply migrations to your RDS. Or you want to seed your data. Or you want to simply look at your data. So you can't expose everything via the API. Of course you can, but you probably shouldn't. You still need to look into your database. You still need to look if indices were created. You still need to look in your data and maybe just execute some queries to test out your SQL. You can do that all in your local machine, but you will still have a distinction to your original database. And every developer knows that sometimes if something goes wrong, you need to look at your prod database and see what happened. So your MacBook here or your laptop here can actually not connect to your RDS database. And this is bad because it's in a completely different, separate network. And I think this is often the part that certifications or exams skip because of course we also learned that you can use a Jumphost, but how to actually get it working is not that complicated, and we'll do that together now. The solution actually looks like that. We still have all of our resources in our private subnet, but what we have additionally is we have a VPC endpoint. And the VPC endpoint is used from the Session Manager. The Session Manager is a CLI edition. So in addition to your AWS CLI, it's actually a plugin that you can use that connects to your VPC endpoint and via this VPC endpoint to your database. So basically this address here will not be some IP of your database or some DNS name. It will simply be localhost and I think 45432. And the Session Manager acts as a tunnel here. So it tunnels all of your requests through the VPC endpoint into your RDS. The cool thing is we don't have any SSH keys to remember. So SSH keys are great, but SSH keys are still a risk of having long-lived tokens, kind of, if they get exposed or if somebody gets access to your laptop, that's not a good thing. So we don't have that. With the session manager, everything is also audited. So we have CloudTrail logs for that. We have port forwarding built in. We have IAM control. So all of the nice thing AWS comes with, we have in the session manager as well. And this is why I want to use this solution. Let's go through the infrastructure a bit. I told you that I brought an open source repository with me as well. It is a CDK repository in TypeScript. And I just have one stack here because I want to showcase it to you in very simple terms. So if you do this in production, maybe put it in separate stacks, especially the database I like to have in a separate stack. So let's go through it. First of all, we have a VPC. The VPC is simply from EC2, a VPC with two ACs because we actually need that, and without any NAT gateways. So we don't need a NAT gateway here, which is cool because NAT gateways are very expensive. Then we have some VPC endpoints, and the VPC endpoints in the Excalibur, so in the diagram I only had one example VPC endpoint, but we actually need three different ones. We need an SSM endpoint, an SSM messages endpoint, and an EC2 messages endpoint. So we create all three of them, and we add an ingress rule for our security group. And in the end, the cool thing is we create our EC2 Jumphost. So a Jumphost is simply an EC2 instance. And this EC2 instance gets access to our RDS database through the security group. So we create a rule, we create a security group, and then we create the EC2 instance here, which bundles everything together. And in the next step, we actually create the RDS database. The RDS database has another security group. We have database credentials, which are already built in Secrets Manager, which I really like. So we can generate a secret string here. So I don't even know the string, even after deploying it. Of course, I can look it up if I have the necessary permissions, but still it's simply in the Secrets Manager. And we can create the database instance with our database credentials. As you can see here, I just gave it a demo name, very small instance class, and some default parameters. But the cool thing is that we now have access through the Jumphost into this RDS database. The full source code is on GitHub. I will link it down below so you can test it out as well. All right, let's look at a live demo. So what I have is I have two terminals here. First of all, I need to start the tunnel now. Again, what the tunnel is doing, it first of all fetches the stack outputs from CloudFormation so that we get an idea of what the database host is, what the instance is, that we can actually start the session manager. So maybe let's have a look into the tunnel script as well. So this is a bash script, so a shell script, it's not Node. First of all, we get the RDS endpoint. We get that by an output from CloudFormation, same as the instance ID. So this is why we have these outputs here. And after we got the endpoints, we print them out nicely, and then we start the session with our AWS SSM like that. As I said, you need to install the AWS CLI and the SSM plugin before that. I've put this down in the blog post as well, but this is how you can start the session manager. Okay, now that we understand how the script looks like, I'm just restarting it here. So we start scripts tunnel. We see we fetch the stack outputs from CloudFormation. We have our information here, and now we wait for the connection. Down below and also in the blog post, I put down how to fetch the database secret ARN and how to fetch the password. I just jump through it now because I already saved the password. In the end, you also need to get it from CloudFormation as an output. You need to get the secret ARN, and then you need to decode it and get the correct password. I won't do it here because then my password will be public. So I already saved it. What I am doing now is I connect using pSQL. So you need to have this installed to the Postgres database. I have the password in here to localhost and my demo database. And now we can see a connection was accepted for my user. And now we can also see I'm connected to the database. So let's just execute some random queries. I'd like to see all tables. So we don't have any tables. That's good. So we can actually create one. I copy one here. So we create a table users. Then we insert some data. And now let's insert some more data. We need multiple rows. And now we can select some data from these users. As you can see now, database is working. We connected to our database, which runs on RDS. So everything works. That's great. Typically, you also need to put this into some scripts. So as you can see, I need to let the tunnel running. Depending on how you seed your data, on how you migrate your data, how you migrate your database, you probably need to do this in CI as well. But with the tunnel script, I did this multiple times already. This works out very great. I think a few things I typically stumble over, so a few gotchas I always had myself, was localhost 5432. If you have this defined in some other scripts as well, and you think this is your local Docker setup, don't be confused by that. So sometimes you need to understand, is your Docker running? Are you connecting to another database? So you can also simply use other ports for that, or typically you can use node-end variables for that as well, that you understand where you actually want to connect to. Because of course, if you connect to your local database, it's much faster. If you have an extensive test suite, it's much faster to connect your test suite against your local database instead of your staging database. And also, I wouldn't recommend doing this with production with exactly the same way and exactly the same port, because this can be quite dangerous, of course. The second thing is you need to keep the tunnel running, what I just said. So you can only connect to it if the tunnel is running. If you stop the tunnel, you can't connect to it anymore. So I can show this to you also. Now it's not working anymore to connect to it because nothing is running on localhost. And then there is a whole other topic about SSH errors. And I don't want to get into that because I spent lots of time about that. The whole thing is about RDS uses an SSL certificate, and AWS has its own certificate authority, which you need to trust. But if you go through localhost now to your database, your localhost is not part of the certificate chain anymore. So it is possible that you get some weird SSL errors. Like in that case, I won't get them, but you can connect to your database with different query parameters if you need to require SSL. For example, RDS in its default settings needs you to connect via SSL and not without SSL, which is a good thing. But sometimes it can also give you some errors about self-signed SSL certificate. So just Google that or put it down in the comments and I can help you out there. So this is it. I also put together a whole infographic about VPC, which shows you everything about subnets, about security groups, about VPCs and all stuff like that. Super interesting and very dense, I would say. So you can get this if you want. And as a second infographic, I also put down the link to the infographic about RDS, where we talk a lot about having your database secure, how to set up your database and how to work with it. If you want them, you can get them. Simply check out the links below. You can print them out and look at them, then you won't forget anything about RDS and VPCs ever again. I hope this helps you. Let me know if you have any questions, and I really hope I can help you building up real-world AWS skills. See you soon. Bye-bye.